The second to last of Lenzi's Policiatteschi, but the last we'll be discussing on this program, as we've already discussed 1979's From Corleone to Brooklyn, this is 1978's Brothers Till We Die, starring Thomas Milan and Thomas Milan. Thomas Milan portrays both the hunchback character that he had previously portrayed in The Tough Ones, aka Rome to the Teeth, and he also portrays the character Menezza he portrayed in Freehand for a Tough Cop. They're brothers, apparently. Twin brothers, somehow, even though one's a hunchback and the other's quite a lanky fellow. I suppose it can happen, there's no reason not, I guess. I have to admit, the illusion is usually pulled off pretty seamlessly. I assume there's body doubles and maybe even a couple of camera tricks employed, although unless someone wants to point out a few things, I generally found the illusion quite well kept up, I have to admit. But it's interesting, I'm assuming that this is a prequel to Rome to the Teeth, as the hunchback character, actually, he dies in that film, and it could be you could perceive it as a sequel to Freehand for a Tough Cop, as Milan's character, Menezza, in that film, he survives, obviously, so I'm not sure if they really cared about the continuity to these things, other than it'd just be a fun idea, right? I'm not sure whose idea this was. Maybe Milan's, I would assume so. Show off his acting chops, have a bit of fun. This film has a very comedic tone, which partly made me assume that maybe this was Dardano Saccheri's idea. He was a screenwriter who claimed that he destroyed the Policiatteschi from the inside by making them more comedic toward the later 70s and early 80s to remove the fascistic undertones. Well, it's not really subtext, it's just text rather, as some would say. Well, Brothers Till We Die apparently has a screenplay credit from Umberto Lenzi. Maybe considering these were characters that he'd in films of his, maybe he wanted to explore them again and said, hey, Milan, why don't you play both? Or maybe Milan's suggested it to him, Lenzi, why don't you write it? I don't know. Whatever the case, it's a fairly entertaining, if not incredibly silly, Policiatteschi. The tone, Freehand for a Tough Cop, was a bit silly, but it still had a very serious tone to it, whereas this is just a complete farce, more or less. And obviously, Rome to the Thief was quite a serious Policiatteschi. But it's a fun enough film. I didn't feel like I wasted my time, although I'm happy to be moving on from the Lenzi cop films at this point in time. Now we'll be moving on to a couple of, what we've got next, Nightmare City, Daughter of the Jungle, the legendary Iron Master, a couple of really sloppy war films in the mid-80s, and some haunted house films, which really probably ought to have been directed by Lucio Fulci, and I think maybe were intended to be, but weren't. It was Lenzi instead. Thanks so much, my friends. Have the best possible day-night you have ever imagined. Thanks again.